the CSTO intervention in Kazakhstan. This discussion will be recorded and you can find it online afterwards, but it's good that we have a good number of participants, and I hope we will have an interesting discussion. For the last 2 weeks, there have been fascinating discussions going on about the protests in Kazakhstan, the nature of the protests, the local dynamics, and also the domestic political dimension of these movements. We decided to focus on the intervention of the CSTO, which is in many ways unprecedented, both for Kazakhstan and for the region. And for this, we have two speakers with us today, whom I'd like to thank very much. Nargis Kassenova, who is a senior fellow and director of the program on Central Asia at the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies at Harvard University, and Temur Umarov, who is a research consultant at Carnegie Moscow Center. I propose we start with Nargis Kassenova. Can you tell us a bit more, maybe, on why the Kazakh president decided to call on the CSTO to intervene, what it means for Kazakhstan and for its relationship with Russia? The floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Marie. Well, I don't know if I can give a satisfactory answer because we don't know all the answers ourselves, and so much has happened over the past 2 weeks. It's really incredible. I don't think at any time of our history, we had such 2 super intense weeks. But as people in this Zoom conference know, the events started unfolding at the beginning of the year, and first we had protests breaking out in Western Kazakhstan over the sudden spike in fuel prices, and that's sort of a cheaper fuel that people use to run their cars, particularly in Western Kazakhstan. The government very quickly tried to satisfy the demands, but the kind of apparently the grievances, have accumulated, and there was this protest potential already, and not only in Western Kazakhstan but throughout the country. So very quickly the protest spread, and very quickly demands became political, and people were asking for the removal of Nursultan Nazarbayev. And the main slogan there was "Shall Cat, Old Man Live," and they demanded elections, free and fair elections. And then they reached the southern capital, Almaty, and that's where the sort of the main scene of violence took place. And very strange things happened on the night between the 4th and the 5th, and then throughout the 5th of January. So we saw protests and much better attended than usual protests in Almaty. There were, crowds of people. We saw violence by the police against the protesters. Then we saw kind of scenes of crowds, protesters, and God knows who was in the streets on those days, clashing with the law enforcement, also beating up each other, and the buildings were put on fire. There was a lot of marauding on the streets. And on this day, the president of the country, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, makes 2 very big decisions. One is that he removes Nursultan Nazarbayev from the position of the chair of the National Security Council. And the second big decision was calling on the help of the CSTO. And the official reason for this was that there is an external terrorist attack. And very quickly, we know that that CSTO decided to grant this assistance, and Russia and Belarus very quickly send their troops, and these were peacekeepers. So the decision was to send peacekeepers, a contingent of peacekeepers, to Kazakhstan to help Kazakhstan deal with this crisis. And then we sort of still don't know what actually happened, because there is this rhetoric of an external terrorist attack, and we still don't know who these terrorists are. Then peacekeepers are sent, but peacekeepers are sent to protect infrastructure objects, right? Also not very clear from whom. And the explanation is that they were asked to protect this infrastructure object so that Kazakh military, Kazakh law enforcement bodies can carry out this operation, counter-terrorist operation, that is still underway until the 19th of January. Then pretty much immediately we started hearing about the coup, an attempted coup, and that this new element was introduced pretty much right away as well. So on the 6th of January, we already hear that that there are some internal elements responsible for violence. So it was an attempt to undermine the constitutional order, and it's a combination. That's what our state secretary, for example, said. It's a combination of external internal actors and with the external support who carry this out. So what was it? So we're kind of trying to untangle what actually it was. The easiest way is to call it a political crisis, which I think it was. And the government still claims some external element. We don't have sufficient proof for that at the moment, and it does seem that it was largely an internal conflict. And I would not exclude external linkages and connections, of course. Well, interestingly, the situation started stabilizing prior to the arrival of the CSTO peacekeepers, which raises the questions to what extent they were actually needed for calming the situation. And my sort of theory about it is that the main purpose of the CSTO, of inviting the CSTO troops, was signaling. So if we take the claim of the government that it was an attempted coup d'etat, and there was this kind of struggle inside the country, inside the political system, then it kind of would make sense, for President Tokayev to appeal to Russia, and by getting this support, kind of signal to to a certain part of the state that he's the one who has this support, who has sort of this this endorsement, because we're trying to understand what was happening with the security forces on that particular day, on the 5th. Why the city of Almaty was unprotected, whose orders they followed, and so on. And another, of course, big part of the puzzle is the removal of the chair of the National Security Committee, KNB, sort of the success of KGB, right? This very powerful, previously very powerful figure, Karim Masimov, from his position, and also he is now accused of treason. His deputies are also gone, and one of the deputies is the nephew of the first president, Nursultan Nazarbayev. So it's very, very complex situation. It seems that it's a conflation of things, and as I was already mentioned, it's very hard to kind of to give one term, you know, to describe what actually happened over the past 2 weeks. And what we see now is the removal of Nazarbayev people from the position of importance, and it seems that many family members fled the country. It seems his youngest daughter is in Dubai. There is suspicion that many other members also are in the United Arab Emirates. So that's the situation as of now. There are questions what actually happened, especially in the corridors of power, actually, and also what happened in Almaty on those days. Was the violence orchestrated? And it seems to me that it was orchestrated. So we are still sort of we're still trying to understand what actually happened.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have the opportunity further in the discussion to come back to what it implies for Kazakhstan's foreign policy. And I know you also have your own ideas on this, but maybe first we listen to Temur Umarov and the vision from Moscow, what this intervention meant for Moscow, how Moscow decided for the first time in its history to intervene through the Collective Security Treaty Organization. Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and thank you, Nargis, for this great introduction into what happened in Kazakhstan. And really, this is something unprecedented. We've never expected something like this to happen in Kazakhstan, and for the last year, many people were talking about a potential of seeing Russian troops in Ukraine, but now we see them in Kazakhstan. So this is something that nobody expected to see, and this is actually what makes this crisis so chaotic. And the actions from different parties are also very ad hoc. And for those who say that it was a very good plan, that this plan was, going on for years, I think this is an overstatement and not the real picture. From Moscow, I think what happened in Kazakhstan, from the thinking in the Kremlin, I'm not a Russian expert, but from what I read, I think that Kremlin puts what happened in Kazakhstan on the line together with other crises along its borders, together with Belarus, with other, Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh crisis, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan fight, Afghanistan, and all that. In the point of view of Moscow, it might look as some actors from the West that want to not let Russia develop and wants to keep Russia in some kind of limited space. And that is why Kazakhstan crisis was taken very seriously, and Russia really wanted to act very quickly and to make sure that the situation will be stabilized as soon as possible. In addition to that, I think that Russia was aware of what is the real situation in Kazakhstan from the early days, even before President Tokayev reached out to CSTO. There was a phone conversation between Tokayev, Vladimir Putin, and Alexander Lukashenko. And I think this was the moment, this might be the moment when the countries decided to involve CSTO into situation, because as Nargis said, this is not just a protest that went under control. It is intra-elite conflict, and President Tokayev was not sure whether his security agents, his siloviki, were trustworthy. And in this situation, the only way out for him to keep the political regime, to keep his own positions, was to reach out to Moscow. And here, actually, from the point of view of reputation, peacekeeping operation under the CSTO umbrella looks much better than if just Russian troops would have been called for help. Because CSTO has a legal basis to do that. And according to officials, this is not called intra-elite conflict or protest movement or something like that. This is called a international terrorist attack on Kazakhstan, which is a good, excuse actually for the government to call foreign troops to help stabilize situation. In addition to what I've said, I think Russia from the very beginning understood that this will be much more a symbolic move than a real action. I think that Russia would never send troops if it realized that Russian soldiers would have to calm protesters on the streets, because for the last many years, nationalist sentiment is growing in Kazakhstan, and this was a risky move for President Tokayev and for Moscow to actually send soldiers, because I don't think that anybody in Kazakhstan, where for the last 30 years the independence was the main value for everyone, would be happy to see foreign soldier, shooting to the people of Kazakhstan. So Russia from the very beginning knew that it is going to be a very short and 100% successful campaign, and the role of CSTO in Kazakhstan would be symbolic, not a real one. And only knowing these two main factors, Russia decided to actually send CSTO. And by doing that, Russia gained some bonuses from its actions in Kazakhstan. First of all, Moscow have helped to preserve a friendly regime in Kazakhstan. This is a very important goal for Russia, and everywhere Russia has good relations with Central Asian countries. This is a very important factor of good relationship. And secondly, Russia managed to boost the authority of CSTO, because for the last several years, CSTO's reputation was damaged. It was mostly seen as a paper tiger. There were different cases when CSTO was called by other countries to help during the different conflicts. Recently, Armenia called CSTO to help during the Nagorno-Karabakh crisis. Lukashenko actually also called CSTO when the protests, mass protest happened, and he wanted to show it as a foreign agent's plan to destroy his presidency. During the Kyrgyz-Tajik border conflict, CSTO also was silent and inactive. So for the last several years, CSTO's reputation was very under damaged, and this new crisis that was very easy to kind of solve by just symbolic move was a good chance that created a window of opportunity for CSTO to regain its reputation in the eyes of others. So And above all that, successful operation has shown that Russia is still a very important, external security guarantor in Central Asia. And this was also for the last several years, Russia was considered to be a lesser dynamic partner in Central Asia, because everyone was pointing at China and saying, look how China is creating outposts in Tajikistan and stuff like that, and Russia is losing its position. But Russia's actions during Kazakh crisis showed once again that Russia is too early to get away from this geopolitical chessboard, if you want. Yeah, this is my points, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Can I add to that, Marie, a little bit?
Yes, of course, you're welcome.
Yes, well, I agree with Timur's points. Just to add a little bit, I also think that the CSTO has been preparing for something like this for a long time, right? The collective rapid reaction force was created in 2009, I think, and was, to deal with terrorist attacks. And, in 2010, there were some changes to the statute of the organization to increase the mandate. And that's in the aftermath of the 2010 crisis in southern Kyrgyzstan. And it was clear that the credibility of the CSTO got a blow, and then, it needed to have some kind of mechanism to react quickly to crisis in the member states. But yes, indeed, until now, until 2 weeks ago, these preparations hadn't been particularly hadn't been useful. So why Kazakhstan became this case, and like in the now community we keep discussing why now, why in Kyrgyzstan it didn't happen, why in Armenia I don't think even officially could ask for the CSTO help. In the end, officially they asked for the draw for help from Russia, drawing on the bilateral security agreement. So it seems to me that the cost-benefit analysis was very different in this case, and indeed, as Timur mentioned, I think very right away the Russians, and other partners understood that there will not be a necessity to actually fight on the ground, and that would have been a disaster of enormous proportion if Russian troops, started beating up, killing the Kazakh protesters. But at the same time, the cost of losing Kazakhstan would be very, very high, right? And then the benefits of the operation, indeed, now CSTO showed that Russia, first and foremost, showed that it can do these kind of things, and it can come to the rescue if a member state is in a real danger. And I think it's a very important point. I also try to make it this lack of correct terminology, and we get this terrorist operation, like terrorist attack. Then we have an attempted coup d'etat. Putin talks about color revolutions, right? He said that we will not let, when this decision was made, he was saying that we will not let color revolutions take place, sort of in the CSTO space. So there is a lot of smoke and mirrors, sort of, and I think that's because it's a very delicate situation. It's a very delicate situation. We have Tokayev, who is the successor of Nazarbayev, right? Appointed by Nazarbayev, who removes Nazarbayev and his people now from the system, right? We have Putin, who says we will not allow color revolutions, helping in this effort, sort of endorsing Tokayev, and kind of helping the removal of the dictator as a result of the protest. Yeah. So kind of putting this together into a kind of narrative that everybody would be comfortable with is a very, very difficult undertaking.
Thank you. That's definitely one of the unprecedented aspects of this situation, that Russia intervened in a situation it would usually design or define as an internal crisis. I think we have enough questions for a first round of questions. We have 2 questions from the chat, which I will ask right now. First of all, regarding the reaction of China to the signal of the on-call CSTO troops deployment. A second question, it's sort of fact-checking regarding the existence of Nazarbayev's private army, which sometimes comes up in certain articles, and about the help China may have provided to Tokayev to cut the internet. I have a question of my own, which I will ask later, and let maybe Phil Murphy ask his question because he raised his hand. And please raise your hands or use the chat to ask questions.
Yeah, I was involved in Kazakhstan with BG Group up until the time we were bought out by Shell, which explains my interest in it. But 2 parts to the question, really. Should we be surprised that it was Tokayev who was the man who was left standing? Because our analysis before the handover was that he was sane, intelligent, and experienced, but without the usual kind of power and financial clout that you might expect a leader to thrive on. And secondly, does that therefore mean that he would have fallen if it hadn't been for CSTO intervention, or were there already forces on the ground moving in his direction? I found it very surprising because of the historic, strong relationship as perceived between Putin and Nazarbayev.
Okay, so maybe you can answer this first round of questions and then we take a second round. Please, Nargis or Timur.
Very surprising. I agree. When Nazarbayev resigned, we're thinking what the kind of the scene. And it seemed to many, including myself, that Tokayev is sort of the transitional figure, and that there will be somebody else, the real successor eventually will emerge. And indeed, the kind of that thinking that Tokayev is not the real successor was supported by the kind of the facts on the ground that he didn't really have full power, full executive power, right? So on right and left on all sides, he was sort of kind of surrounded by people who were, you know, who were reporting to the first president, who were part of the kind of this clan clique, however you call it. So it's all kind of how it played out. It's very, very interesting and very surprising. I don't think anybody really planned it this way. Yeah. And I don't think Tokayev was really entertaining kind of major ambitions, and you know, in this we see more family members with kind of with these ambitions, right, and more impatient and so on. Tokayev didn't give this impression, so I don't think he was preparing for anything like that. But you know, the circumstances kind of that's how the circumstances took place. You know, the stars collided. I don't know what the correct expression is. So he found himself in this situation. I suspect that there was an attempt to topple him, and then he very quickly reacted and kind of turned the table back and inviting a CSTO. If you take this narrative, then inviting CSTO was probably the only choice he had. If we think that security services were not fully under his command, that law enforcement bodies were not fully under his command, by inviting CSTO, by getting the support of Putin, he kind of could really very quickly turn the table on the situation. But these are speculations, right? These are speculations based on what kind of these pieces of information we have. But it seems to me Tokayev was not preparing for this situation. It all happened extremely fast. I think if there were preparations, it were on the other side. And I do take this claim that there was an attempted coup kind of more seriously than an external terrorist attack.
I would take a question about China, if I may. I think that right now, the role of China in what is happening in Kazakhstan is kind of a little bit overestimated, because of course China is a very important player in many spheres, especially in economic. But when we talk about politics and security, Russia here is much more influential and has a lot of instruments to show its influence in the region, and if we compare it to China. So from the very beginning, China didn't really understood what is going on in Kazakhstan. If we take a look even at the official statements, January 6th was the first day when China reacted. Before that, it was silent. And January 6th, MFA said that it is a domestic issue that we hope Kazakhstan people will solve on their own. The next day, when President Tokayev publicly said that it is a terrorist threat and Russia was called for help, China changed its mind completely. President Xi Jinping called Tokayev, saying that it is a color revolution that we should fight, etc. January 11th, there was a phone call between Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi with his colleague in Moscow, Mr. Lavrov, and they were also talking about color revolutions. So I think the narrative here is created not in China. China just follows what Kazakhstan and Russia are saying, and China is okay with Russia stabilizing the situation. Actually, number one priority for Beijing in Central Asia is stability, especially considering that it borders China's very sensitive Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region that China wants to see very stable and does everything legal and illegal to keep it stable. So for Beijing, it in the short term doesn't matter whether it will be Kazakhstan's own forces that will stabilize the situation, or it will be a friendly Russian forces that will do that. But of course, I'm not saying that it is the sign that there is no competition. Of course, there is a competition, but the relations between China and Russia are not black and white. There are many shades of gray in this relationship, and we cannot just say if it's not cooperation, it's competition. It's not like this. This situation is more complex. And a bit about the internet shutdown. I don't think that China really helped Tokayev to cut the internet, because it was not a difficult thing to do. You just shut down the internet equipment and that's it. If we talk about Chinese blockages, these are very nuanced. They have special equipment that takes down messages, even personal messages from the messengers like WeChat. We didn't see something like this in Kazakhstan. In Kazakhstan, the whole internet was shut down, and Nargis also can say that she couldn't connect with her relatives in Almaty. So yeah, it was not the Chinese way to shut down the internet.
Yeah, it's very Kazakh way. It's not the first time internet is shut down during the protest. That's why some people were, going for a walk on the 5th, thinking, okay, oh, these are protests. So that's why the internet is down, and some of them were killed. Just being passerbys, just turning up in the wrong place in the wrong time. But in terms like surveillance, yes, we have Russian technology for digital surveillance. We have Chinese technology for digital surveillance, and there are different kind of levels of sophistication. Like turning off internet, that's not the sophisticated way, obviously. Yeah, but there are some other ways, and DPI and all that for eavesdropping. But the interesting thing is that the biggest scandal we had in this regard was the use of Pegasus spyware, and President Tokayev was also apparently listened to. The data is for the period until he was president, so we don't know whether he was eavesdropped during the presidency, but yeah, there is surveillance and there is kind of an apparatus to control internet.
Thank you. We have further questions. First, on the popular opinion in Kazakhstan about the CSTO's intervention. A second question, why would Moscow, if it knows about intra-elite fighting in Kazakhstan, support one side against the other, given that both sides are, or neither of these sides are anti-Russian? And I will use the opportunity to ask my own question. What will be the impact of this intervention in Kazakhstan, both domestically and in terms of foreign policy? You both mentioned the fact that a participation of Russian troops to the repression of demonstrations would have meant, would have had highly destabilizing effects. But what about the domestic consequences of Tokayev being officially backed by Russia, and what are the foreign policy consequences? Nargis, you wrote that Kazakhstan would not return to Russia's fold, but obviously the support will have a cost anyway. So yeah, please.
Shall I start? Yeah. On the public opinion, it is divided. It is divided. There are people, and I was among them, who reacted very negatively. My first reaction was highly negative because it seemed that CSTO troops are invited to deal with the protests. But when kind of more information started emerging, and I already voiced my kind of theory about what happened, I don't see it now in such a dramatic light as I used to. So there is this group of people kind of thinking that it's a betrayal, betrayal of the sovereignty, and why Tokayev did that, and there is another group, and particularly people in Almaty, they're saying, okay, it was necessary. We had this complete disorder and violence in the streets, and it's like to do and if somebody was ready to give us help, that's good. The kind of the degree of the degree of discontent is sort of going down because now they are out, right? This peacekeeping mission is over, so they left. It's only a basic two-week thing, but the discussions continue. So people talk in chats, and kind of there are these discussions on social media, and it became sort of a marker. Are you supporting the decision or you're not supporting the decision? So there are all these kind of, the violence is down, but now the discussions on social media, are very heated, very, very heated. Whom you support? Do you support Tokayev? You don't support Tokayev? Do you support this decision? You don't support this decision. Who were these people in the streets? Are these kind of the poor, desperate elements, in the society, or kind of the all bandits? And so now it's sort of the heat went to this space of public discussion and semi-public private discussion. And I don't know, we don't have the polls, right? What percentage of the population is against or not, or like me, for example, who kind of whose opinions somewhat changed from the beginning and to now. Why Russia intervened in the internal domestic crisis? I as already mentioned, I think they thought that the potential costs could be very high. Lukashenko mentioned that, we were afraid to lose Kazakhstan, right? Which is interesting, to whom to lose, and unlike other color revolutions, we don't hear much about the West, and we don't know kind of where these foreign elements were trained, because, well, that's what the government keeps saying, that these were people trained outside, so. Okay, we're waiting for more information where we were trained. Also, there is this kind of element of Islamists, right? The government is saying that the Islamists were involved, there were sleeping cells, and so that's not Western kind of intervention, clearly. Yeah, so there is something else going on. So, but I think Putin decided that the situation is serious enough, and the country was actually in danger. So and that's I hope one day we'll find out, kind of what the thinking was and what kind of information they had, and what the analysis was. But it's pretty amazing that Kazakhstan, with 30 years of independence and mid-level country that has been investing a lot in the military, in the security apparatus, where things seem to be under control, it was, kind of was so proud of its stability and all that, exploded like this and had to ask for, for help from Russia. Temporarily help, symbolic help, but still it's quite a blow to the, definitely, a reputation. Impact on foreign policy, as I argued in my article, I think it's overall it's very sad that Kazakhstan found itself in this situation, once again, after being an independent, not poor state, for 30 years, but I don't think it's completely kind of destroys everything that has been accumulated in this regard, in terms of kind of sovereignty and nation state building. I think there will be efforts to and we see signs of it. We see what our ambassadors are saying in the West already, that there will be kind of there will be efforts to maintain the multi-vector foreign policy, right? But as you rightly said, kind of there will be a price to pay for what just happened. Definitely, there is a big favor that Putin made to Tokayev and Russia to Kazakhstan. So let's see what will be asked for it in return. And here I want to say that it's not that Kazakhstan was not a kind of very close with Russia and now it has to be very close with Russia. Kazakhstan has been kind of very close with Russia since the very beginning, you know. So it's not a kind of a term, right? But now it will, I guess, will lean closer. Maybe will be a little bit more attentive to what Russia says. Although the first things we see is the signaling about multi-vector foreign policy, the signaling about like the appointment of this nationalist person, not very palatable to the Russian elites, to the position of the Minister of Information and Social Development, right? And immediately we have the Russian reaction. The head of Россотрудничества, Evgeny Primakov, says, "No, I'm not going to meet with this person, yeah, because of his anti-Russian rhetoric." So there is this signaling, internal and external, right, that we want to keep our multi-vector foreign policy balancing act. So I'm hopeful that that we'll be able to do that, but the situation, the environment is worsening for that, that's for sure. Apart from our political crisis and the weakening of Kazakhstan, as a result of this, the growing animosity between Russia and the West, is a very difficult environment to navigate now for countries like Kazakhstan. They try to keep good relations with them.
I just want to, if I may, add to this and to answer another question about why Moscow supported Kazakhstan, Tokayev, because neither of the parties was anti-Russian. I think for Moscow, there were several scenarios here. If Russia would have, decided not to act at all, the situation was first of all unexpected, and it could become a chaos on the border that is not, heavily controlled by Russian troops, because Russia actually has a very not secured borders with Kazakhstan, because Kazakhstan is a part of custom unity, and it is not the border that earlier was, that Russia thought about to secure very much. So it was in the interest of Russia to stabilize the situation as soon as possible, and it was just decision to support a person who is legitimately held his position. I think for Russia there was no other options. How can Russia support Nazarbayev, a person who is not on the political scene already, and he himself step down, and it's obvious that you cannot think of Nazarbayev as a person who is eligible of ruling the country in the future, especially since we don't know where he is, so I think for Russia it wasn't a question of who likes Russia most. It was a question of just security and stability on its border. And in addition to what Nargis said, that's true. I also agree that Tokayev, as a diplomat, when he acts in domestic issues, he thinks about foreign policy. And this appointment of Askar Umarov as a Minister of Information is a kind of a little, blow to Russia, showing that he's not going to be somebody who will do whatever Russia wants from him. I mean, take a look at how President Lukashenko in Belarus managed to not to follow Russia's rules, taking into consideration that his situation is much worse than Tokayev's. He is not popular at all, but even in his catastrophic situation, he manages to, make all of these integrational projects with Moscow just a piece of paper and nothing. And in addition to the appointment of Askar Umarov, actually, the first, if I'm not mistaken, ethnically Russian was appointed to a very high position. Roman Sklar was appointed as a deputy vice minister, which is also a sign, of that Kazakhstan, on the one hand, is not going to follow everything that Russia is saying, but at the same time, it is a very close, friendly country for Russia, and Russia shouldn't. Russia should trust the current regime.
So we can have a last round of questions, starting with Christopher Hartwell. But if there are other people willing to ask questions, this is the last opportunity. Christopher, please.
Great, thank you, Marie. Nargis, good to see you. Temur, excellent points. My question is quick and succinct. Where does this leave economic reform in Kazakhstan? We've seen concentration in the economy. We've seen a backing away from land reform. We've seen Eurasian Economic Union, Russia trying to impose its blueprint on Kazakhstan and Kazakhstan resisting. Where does this take us now that CSTO has been involved, that there has been this change? Is there going to be economic reform?
Okay, so if there are no further questions, you have 8 minutes left to answer these questions and make your final remarks. Please, Nargis, Temur, pick up.
That's a good question. It's a multi-billion-dollar question, of course. Definitely, there will be socioeconomic reforms, because that's what we see in the speeches. I think there is kind of there is this very now clear understanding that that questions of inequality, poverty, should be handled. We see that. Definitely, we will see some redistribution. Yeah, and definitely, kind of some people got too rich, and I would think some assets of the family will be also, kind of redistributed. And now, okay, I saw very briefly the headline, something like the plans of the, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, like the plans to privatize some RUK assets. So there will be something. I think there is still not clear kind of path outlined what kind of reforms we will see, because definitely now there will be kind of the big push for more populist redistributive reforms. Yeah. On the other, I think the kind of, if we look at the people who are appointed to positions, yeah, these are sort of liberals, and the kind of, I think privatization is still something that that everybody believes in, sort of at the top. So definitely some redistribution. I think restructuring, a badly needed restructuring of the quasi-state sector. So that's something I see, but I'm not an economist, and my sense is that the kind of now it will be worked out. And he's not an economist, right? That's something people point out, that he wants too many things at the same time, right? To kind of deal with inflation, but at the same time, kind of to do these handouts of things, and kind of, yeah, I don't know.
From my point of view, I think that from now, reforms in economy will shift from liberalization and shift from market to a more kind of paternalistic role of the government, because now the people who were against of market controlling everything in the economy will say, look what it led to, look at gas prices spiking because of our liberal reforms, and now government shouldn't let everything for market to decide. Let's put more control into different spheres of economy, and I think this is what we were going to see in the nearest future. I would also say
that's precisely my worry, Temur. Precisely my worry.
But again, this is just my opinion, and nobody can predict the future. And if somebody says that it can predict the future, don't trust them. They're liars. So, and I think that in political sphere, we will see also something like this happening. The crisis that was not a, what we saw in Almaty was not activists and journalists and people, just civil society doing, but the government now has an excuse in the future to point at what happened in the beginning of 2022 and say that now we should put more control on our society and not let everyone to go to the streets when they want. And I think that this will be a good excuse for the government in the future to control more all of the spheres of life in Kazakhstan.
On this optimistic note, and if you have no further comments, Nargis or Temur, I'd like to thank you both for being with us today, and I'd like to thank the audience for the questions and for listening. And I guess we will have further opportunities to discuss Kazakhstan in the coming weeks and months. So thank you all, and hope to see you for further discussions very soon. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.